Well, good morning, everybody. We are about to dive into Genesis chapter 12 to 25, 26-ish, and we're going to be talking about Abraham and his life this morning. So let's just pray. Father, we love you, and we're glad to be here. We're glad to be alive, and we just know that you have a lot for us. Will you show us life, how to live faithfully in you through these words this morning. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, so Abraham, do you like this guy? What is it you like about him? He has a beard. Now, what do you like about him? Faith. He has faith. Anything else? Obedience. Those two things kind of go together, don't they? Faith and obedience. Anything else you like about him? He has what? He has his own army? Yeah, he does. That's kind of cool, isn't it? I'm going to get my 318 men and we're going to go out and make a mess. He's a worshiper, yeah. Talks about that a lot, doesn't it? Anything else you like about him? Faith in the unseen? Not just in what he saw. Yeah, he really trusted God. Good. What was that again? He's rich. Yeah. 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 It kind of tells you that to be a Christian you don't have to be poor. It's kind of okay. Yeah. Mario, was it you? Did you have a... Oh, I heard this something. Oh, inheritance. That's what it was. That kind of goes along with that. Good. Okay, let me just... I'm just going to back up a little bit and talk about Genesis as a whole. There's several ways of kind of outlining the book, and it's important to outline the book. I know that takes a bit more work than we're used to, but it's important when you're trying to get a handle on things, because how do I say this? Biblical books don't always move in kind of a straight line, and so sometimes you can be a little bit confused about some things. And when you outline the book, sometimes it not only gives it clarity, but it also helps you to just get a handle on it, to understand what's important. So here's one way of outlining the book. Chapter 1 to chapter 11, you can call primeval history. Primeval doesn't mean it's the first evil. There you go. Primeval history, because it seems to be sort of before everything that we're familiar with. And then 12 to around 25, 26 is going to be about Abraham. And then 27 to 36 is going to be about who? Jacob. Good. That's a trick question because everybody thinks, okay, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. Well, yeah, Isaac's there, but he's actually he's a pretty minor character, really, at least in terms of this. Abraham, Jacob, and the last person from 37 to 50 that is prominent is Joseph, which is very interesting because Joseph, he plays such a large part, but he's not actually in the, we would think, well, he's going to be in the line of the Messiah because, of course, that's how that works. But that's not actually how it works. So it's kind of interesting. The other way of outlining it is there's this word that occurs several times, which is called Toledoth. What's that? It means, it's often translated as generations or family history or something like that, okay? So it occurs a bunch of times, 10, 11, 12, 13, something like that. So for instance, I think it is at the end of chapter, chapter 11, verse 30. This is the account of Shem. This is the Toledoth of Shem, and then it gives something. And it occurs a whole bunch of times, and it kind of it kind of ties together all the stories, but it also breaks it up in a sense. Okay, so you can see them if you're looking for them. Okay, so this is, it'll usually be, this is the account of something. Okay, so, okay, so, now, okay, I've already put this up here, so it's no good me asking you to outline it. But it's important to outline these chapters. So here, I've already done it for you. What do you notice about the outline that I've given there? I've just outlined it by sort of topic, what I see as the topic. What do you notice? That there's red color in some of it. What's that? Oh, yeah, I underlined a couple things. Yeah, yeah. Oh, no, I'm not supposed to do that. Oh, what else? That was just a mistake. Don't worry about that. What's that? That you can't read it? Yes, it's quite small. That's true. You've got to get it down, to get it on the page. Okay. The numbers. Yes, there are numbers beside it. Those are the chapters. Good. What's that? Births and deaths? Yeah, that's true. Hey! That's it! Shazam! There's a lot of repeats. This is one of the things that when you're reading in Scripture, like if you're reading Samuel, in 1st and 2nd Samuel, you're going to be reading things and you're going to say, if you're awake and not reading before bed, you're going to say to yourself, that's weird. Didn't I read? I must have read this passage and fallen asleep, and I'm just reading it again. Didn't I already read this passage before? And the reason is because there's actually a lot of what looks like repeats or things that are very similar. So one of the things that's going to be repeated is there's kind of a Hagar and Ishmael running away or being driven out. Right? Yes, of course, I remember that. There's going to be a whole thing about taking, the patriarch takes his wife and they go somewhere and the ruler in that place says, hey, I like this woman. How are you related? And he's like, it's my sister. So I don't kiss my sister, so, that happens. It happens 3 times, actually, twice with Abraham and once with Isaac. What else do you have that's repeated? Blah, 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 blah. Anyway, there's a number of things that are repeated. And when you have repeated things, it's underlining important, wake up, flashing neon lights. Okay? Yeah, so that's important. And it kind of, it keeps you from thinking this is really, really confusing, I guess, is one of the ways, if you outline it like this. All right, everybody good? Yeah, everybody's good. What else do I want to say? I think that's it for that point. Okay, what do you notice in the transition? We've been reading up to chapter 11. What's different when you hit chapter 12? Okay, so obviously we're talking about Abraham now. What's different? Yeah, great point. Yeah, you can't always define what it is, but you can feel the difference, can't you? When you're walking through chapters 1 to 11, there's a whole bunch of genealogies, which there are as you go along, but it feels, remember I said it felt like a sketch. Quickly, we're just going to sketch this. We're not going to tell you a whole bunch, but we're going to sketch this. And then when you get to Abraham, now suddenly that sketch takes on flesh. It's more like a movie. It has color, it has movement, it has the texture, much more, a more depth of texture of real life. And part of the reason is because stories, and this is about your first really big story, is intended to draw you into the story. It's intended to pull you into a life. Okay, now, what does it mean? We've been talking about, Enoch walked with God and Noah actually walked with God. Now, what does that really mean? What does it really look like to walk with God? I mean, we've had the little sketch here, but how does that look? What does it really look like? And so now you're going to get, for however many chapters that is, 14 or so, you're actually going to get, okay, now we've got some flesh on it. Let's really see how that works. When you go to a movie, do you ever get wrapped up in the character? That's what they really hope will happen, don't they? And so something bad happens, and you feel sad, right? Don't you? And something really good happens, and you feel excited. Now you could just sit back and say, "Oh yeah, they're doing that," but that's mostly not what happens, isn't it? You find yourself identifying with the character, even sometimes if you don't like the character. That's the power of a story. The power of a story is it's meant to pull you in and to connect you somehow. You see yourself, or you evaluate the choices that are made by the character, and you say, don't do that. Don't open that door. Freddy Krueger's behind the door. If I was in that house, I would be phoning the police. I wouldn't be hanging around. I don't watch Freddy Krueger, by the way, or any of those things. They freak me out. So must be one of you. That must be one of you that does that. Anybody like those, Nightmare on Elm Street? I'm not going to admit to that. But isn't that what happens in a story? You see the character, you feel the character, you emote with the character, and you evaluate their choices and say, oh no, that's the wrong choice. This is, you instinctively know, if the person's greedy, you instinctively feel, oh, I feel the draw of the money that you could get for this, but don't do it. It's not going to turn out well. So Abraham, this story is about a real character, a real person who lives his life, and you're meant to see yourself in him. You're meant to see yourself in a number of the characters, but especially him, and to also evaluate the choices that you would make in that situation. And conversely, kind of play out in your life, oh, how does this work for me now? It's always interesting when, you have a family member who watches, a TV show and they see a scene and they're like, that's really, really stupid what they did. And then they turn around and they do the same thing in real life. You're like, don't you remember all the names you were calling that person on the TV? And do you remember that part? No. But that's what it's meant to do. So we're all wondering, we're all sitting here. In fact, we were talking about this last night. We were talking about Heidi Baker, and how it wasn't the last time she was here, it was the time before, how she talked about, I think having the boat on the mission field and all the problems that happened and obstacles getting it and what occurred and breaking down and how she felt about it. And the thing was that because she did that, because she didn't just talk about, oh, it was, going from glory to glory, everything was wonderful, and there was the obstacles, but we just pressed through, and da-da-da-da, you can't connect to that. Then you say, oh, she's a superstar, and I wish I was like that, but I can never be like that. But when you hear the texture of what it was like, I was discouraged about that. And I kind of wondered, is this ever going to happen? Even though God's, when you start to hear the real texture of it, you can connect. And you can say, okay, That's what it is to have a real life with God through the obstacles. It doesn't mean that we're always on the top of the mountain. So I can maybe I can walk through a life like that with God. Maybe I can go on the mission field and do this for God. Because you see the texture of a life and you say, okay, I can connect with that. I don't have to be superhuman. I'm not just a painted character or a caricature that has flesh, and I have flesh, and maybe I can live a life with God like that too. And so it's the same here. You see this life, walking with God. What does that mean? Yeah, having your wife being schmoozed by the Hollywood guys. Yeah, that's going to push your inadequacy buttons, isn't it? I'm not as good as Tom Cruise. Dang. Yeah. Yeah. That's right. How many decades was it? Several. That's good. Yes, several decades. That's a long time. You have a promise. Hey, you're going to have this promised son. Okay. I'm still waiting. God, I'm still waiting. That's a long time to wait. That's tough. You same one? Good. Okay. Mimi. That's right. He had to send Ishmael away. Do you think he cared about that? Yeah, actually, he really did. He really did. That's one of the reasons I think that he's called Abraham, or Abraham. Because actually, he actually does have the heart of a father. It's really interesting. I think it's in chapter 15 where he talks about, where God is giving him this promise. You're going to have a promised son, and you're going to have, like the stars in the sky, and blah, blah, blah. And he's like, that's great, but what about my son Ishmael? Like in the middle of all this stuff that's going to be for him and his lineage and the promises, and he's thinking about his son Ishmael. That's like, oh, that's the heart of a father. Yeah, he's not the promised son. He's not the one through everything will happen. He's not the son of his wife Sarah. But still, he has a heart for his son. It's kind of a cool insight about him. To him, Ishmael is not just, well, we tried this and it didn't work, so forget about that. Any other down moments for him? Yeah, probably the pressure of not having a child, not only yourself, but also I would imagine it was probably difficult sometimes with Sarah, because of course in those days, in those cultures, I don't want to say the major, but certainly a major portion of a woman's identity came from bearing children. And if you can't bear children, wow, that's a problem. It's a problem for the man, but it's a real problem for the woman, because her identity is locked up in this. And obviously our society has changed quite a bit, but still sometimes women really feel the stigma of not being able to have children. And the as if there's something missing, something that they desperately want. Yeah, so there's a lot of sort of downtimes, aren't there? So his life is not just this sort of, yeah, everything's awesome. Yeah, praise the Lord, pass the popsicles. It's not like that for him. He's got his moments of, whoa, and his moments of, oh, I just hate my life. Although he probably doesn't say I hate my life, but, maybe it feels like that for him. Let me just say one more thing. There's a couple things about Abraham. If I can just find the note, because I don't want to miss it. Okay, I want to say there's three basic things that these chapters, and probably the whole book, really is about. Number one is going to be covenant, and I talked about this a little bit. Multiple places. Actually, you can probably put this slide up if you want, James. Multiple places it talks about the covenant that God is going to make, or the promises that he makes on the front end of the covenant, which become part of the covenant. In fact, it occurs... Oh, here we go. Wait. Yeah, okay, that's good. Very good. You're going to have to do this one by one. These are just the major places, but there's also minor places where there's little pieces about the covenant that are stuck in. So this is all about the relationship that God and a human being have. Always at the heart of this is this covenant that God is making with Abraham. He has these promises, and how is Abraham going to walk out his life in the middle and be faithful in the middle of this covenant? Okay, that's why Abraham is talked about as being man of faith in Hebrews chapter 11. But in the bottom line, faith is about trust. God has said this, and sometimes it doesn't look good. It doesn't even look like it's going to happen, but am I going to trust him? Is he trustworthy? Is he going to come through on what he's said? And this is our story, isn't it? Because that's sort of at the heart of what we do in the middle of this relationship. God says stuff to us, and we have to figure out, how am I going to live under that when it doesn't look good, especially when it doesn't look good. Like, where are these promises you keep promising me? They're just not happening. So trust is the big thing that you see in Abraham, and the big thing that we have to come to as well. So that's I would say the major part of this. And so, in each individual story, we're invited to come into that and into this life to see how this works, see where there's trust, where there's decision, and how that works out. Because maybe it gives us a picture of how it's going to work out for us. Another part of this is that it's really the working out of the divine rescue of human beings. You can't separate, chapter 12 and on from what's happened earlier. What's wrong with the world? Sin. And how are we going to get out from under this? What is God going to use? That's right, seed of the woman. Now we're looking for the moment. Who is the seed of the woman? Yeah, ultimately it is Jesus, isn't it? But in this story, we're still looking. And now we've come upon Abraham, and there's a lot of time spent with Abraham. Maybe he's the one. And in fact, he is the one, in a sort of less than full sense. And the third part that this is really about is that the Jewish story is actually not just a Jewish story. It's actually a part of the universal story. All human beings rely on the Jewish story to get us out of trouble. The rescue for all of us relies on the Jewish story, beginning with Abraham. So what? So that's important. That's what the fate of the world is resting on. Okay, let's start in chapter 12. Can you, James, just go through there. Actually, back in chapter 11, verse 30. Always before a break, or usually before a break, there's something that is given that sort of gives you a little inkling of what's going to happen next. Okay, and so the little inkling is this. Sarah was barren and she had no children. Ooh, that's a problem. Everybody says, ooh, that's a problem. Everybody say it right now. Ooh, that's a problem. Okay, so that's the precursor. Remember earlier, end of chapter 2, Adam and Eve were naked and they felt no shame. And you're thinking, wonder what's going to happen now. Wonder why they just threw that little line in there. So here's another little line. She was barren. So that's a problem, especially when you start to realize what's being asked. So beginning in chapter 12, what is it that God asks Abram to do? Yeah, leave it all. Leave your country, your land, your family, etc. Everything that you kind of know, and go to a place you don't know. Anybody here like to do that? I wonder if this is, I don't know that it's stereotypical, but God often does that. God often asks you to unhook yourself from where you are, the things that hold you in safety, and sometimes literally he moves you. To Toronto, exactly. How'd you know? And what you don't realize is, at least sometimes, is that once you're unhooked, you're on that journey, and you can't go back, or you can go back, but it's not good for you. Once he's got you halfway out there hanging, then he cuts off that part behind you, and then you're like, okay, I guess I really need to trust you now. Please help me. Anybody ever been in that place? Yeah. And it feels a bit like, this is good. This was an adventure when we started, God. But now it's an adventure. I'm not sure I like it that much because I don't know where I'm going. But he does that. And then if you notice in the beginning of just the next couple verses are in poetry. And this is the beginning of the promise. What's the promise here? Great nation, blessings. Yeah. Okay. Do you want to put up the slide, James, on the? There's actually 5 parts to this. You can boil it down to 3, but there's basically 5 parts to the patriarchal blessings. Okay, so he's going to get there in a second. Oh, forward. You know what? It's one of those things that scholars use. And I don't know that I've ever actually remembered what it is, but I just think, oh, it means like from this verse forward a little bit. And FF is, actually strangely enough, I think FF is a little shorter than F. But don't listen to me. I don't know what I'm talking about. Okay, so here are the 5 promises. Okay, you're going to possess this the land. So you're going to have a promised land. That's pretty cool when you don't have a home. Hey, I'm sleeping on the streets. I'm going to give you a $1 million house. Okay. Number 2, I'm going to give you a son. That's pretty cool since my wife can't have kids. I'm not sure how that's going to work, God. Number 3, the descendants will become a great nation. And presumably, you're not going to have the great nation until you have the son. So the son's a little bit of a bottleneck here. If you don't have the son, you don't get a lot of the other stuff. And Abraham's name will become great. Is Abraham's name great? Boy, it really is, isn't it? Christianity, Muslims, Abraham is the man. Jews, Abraham is the man. So his name actually did become great, became quite famous. And all the peoples on the earth will be blessed and, enemies cursed through Abraham and his seed. And by the way, in those 2 verses, the word blessed occurs 5 times. That tells you that blessing is the major kind of theme at this point. Blessing is, about prospering, and it has concrete connotations in those days. It has to do with having children. If you're blessed, you have children, you have lots of money, you have long life, you have peace. There are a lot of things that kind of go with that. So God's blessing, his favor, is all on Abraham and in this. And here's what it's going to be. And actually, when you go through this book, you're going to see the partial playing out of this. Now, what is the ultimate end of all of this? How does this most fully work out beyond the book of Genesis? Okay, beyond Egypt, yeah. Okay, end up in Egypt and then going beyond Egypt. This is one of those questions where you can cheat. The Christian cheat. The answer to that question is Jesus, because Jesus is the answer to every question. Yeah, well, you can cheat on this one. Yeah, Jesus. And Jesus blessed the whole world because he's the one who ultimately turns upside down and restores what is lost. We're in the middle of that restoration. But you're going to see a partial fulfillment as you go along. And here's the thing. Each one of us, wow, I'm really preaching this morning. This is really good. I'm just going to keep going. Well, I don't know if it's good. I hope it's good. But the thing is that we're part of this story. We're part of this story. We're part of this lineage. We've come into the lineage of Abraham. We've been adopted into this tree that is the Jewish nation, etc., and ultimately finds itself in Jesus, and we are like him. And so in our life, we also bless the world. Ultimately, when Jesus returns, everything is going to be turned upside down and restored fully. But in the meantime, we carry with us the kingdom, in a sense. And wherever we go, we have the opportunity to change the atmosphere, to bring a sniff, an aura, a small taste of the kingdom of heaven. So, I lived in Israel for several months on a kibbutz, which is a communal farm, and I worked in a kitchen 1 day a week, and it was really kind of it wasn't a lot of fun because there was a lot of sort of tension, rivalry. There was sort of the older woman who had previously been in charge of the kitchen for this whole place, and I don't mean like a kitchen like like a little, like there's one oven. It's like big place. And then there was the younger, very strong woman as well. And so there's a lot of conflict about how things should be done, et cetera, et cetera. And so I would go in there. They would tell me, scrub the pots, Gordon. And I would be okay. Another day scrubbing this scum out of the pots, big things. And I just tried to, I tried to be myself in Jesus and do well. Carried a pretty good attitude, but one day was a bad day. And I wasn't carrying the presence of Jesus. I was carrying the foul stench of the evil one. Or at least, yeah. And so I was just having a bad day, and I was really like, if you could have pictured me, there would have been this cloud around me, And the leader of the place came to me, as if she ever noticed me, I thought. And she came to me and said, Gordon, don't be like us. Don't be like me. Okay, be like yourself. And I thought, oh, how interesting that who I had portrayed through Every Day Except This One was actually having an effect and was actually noticed. So you may not even notice that people care or it's having an effect on them, but it does have an effect on them. What you carry matters, and what you bring is a blessing. So this might have been written thousands of years ago, but it applies to you. You bring a blessing into the earth, into the sphere that you're in, by carrying Jesus and by acting out, living out the life of Jesus. Anybody up for that? Yeah. It's a good thing. It's a great thing. Problem is, a lot of times we just think, what, little me? I'm not. What am I bringing? And we get sucked down, like I did, sucked down into the sort of morass of everything else that's going on, to live out just like everybody else. Okay, Abraham. Wow, we're really off the text. Abraham. Okay, so he's 75 years old, and he brings everybody with him. And it says in verse, wow, I need glasses for that one, 7. To your offspring I'll give this land. And so he built an altar to the Lord who had appeared to him. So we're going to have our first instance, we're told, of Abraham worshiping God in this place. The God. The one God. Okay. And then we have this first sister-wife story. I call it the sister wife because she's his wife, but he claims she's his sister. So if you get married, guys, and you travel someplace, don't claim that your wife is your sister. It's not a good thing. And she will pay you back. Well, what do you think is important about this story? First of all, what happens? Who had 12? You guys had 12. What happens in this story? Abraham lies. Okay, that's true. Hey, by the way, in the Bible, when there's a famine, the thing to do is to go to Egypt. Do you know why that is? Because what? Yeah, they always have food, except, of course, in Joseph's time. But they always have food because the Nile rises, floods, brings all the nutrients into the land. They stop up little canals, etc., and they grow things. And so when every place else doesn't have food, Egypt almost always has food. So that's why they go to Egypt when there's a famine. So the natural thing is we're going to go to Egypt. Yeah. Where do you go if there's no food? So that's where they go. But why does he say, this is my sister? He's afraid. Yeah, he's afraid he'll be killed. What else? He wants to be treated well. Yeah. So he thinks, if I say this is my wife, then they might kill me and take her. But if I'm the brother, then convention may stop them. I may be able to bargain my way around this. He's not believing in the promise of God. Exactly. She kind of was. She kind of was. She is related to him. Ew. No, she's related off a little bit. I guess you could do that in those days. So she kind of is his sister. Do you ever have that temptation? Well, I sort of told the truth, part of the truth. What's the downside? Okay, so there's one thing right there, isn't it? There's always this temptation to shade the truth when we're under pressure. Any shaders? People like shade? Yeah. Sure.
I just kind of found it interesting that Abraham told Sarah that, right? To do it.
Yeah.
But it doesn't say if she objected or anything.
I know. Yeah, that's right. He told her, when we go there, please say I'm your sister. It doesn't tell us if she had any reaction or not. It's true. Maybe she went along with it. Maybe she felt like she didn't have a choice. Yeah, so there they are. But what's the result of it all? Okay, she's not quite taken. That would be a problem. I mean, a bigger problem. Say that again? Okay, there's disease. Is this the one where they have disease? Yeah. Okay, good. Because sometimes there's other things that happen. Oh yeah, that's right. There are diseases. And by the way, the language is a little different than used in Exodus. But if you're reading this and you remember the Exodus story, you couldn't help thinking Egypt, diseases, judgment of God. You couldn't help but sort of evoke that story. But yeah, so there's disease. And what is the Pharaoh's response? Does he? What's that? Okay, he gave her back. Okay. Pharaoh knows there's something above him. Yeah, that's true. And of course, most, we're kind of used to, how do I say this? I mean, they saw the divine everywhere. It was just a given that there are gods. And so, a lot of your conventions about what you can do and can't do are not just, well, the law is going to catch up with me if I break it. No, the God or gods are going to catch up with me if I break this, because it's really bound in them and what they do and what they say we can do. So, So when he realized, let's see, what does it say? Oh, by the way, she was very beautiful, just in case you always wondered. She was a very beautiful woman. Not beautiful, very beautiful. And so it says, Pharaoh summoned Abram, "What have you done to me? Why didn't you tell me she was your wife?" Yeah. Yeah. How did he know? Yeah, how did he know? It doesn't really say, does it? Although I suppose it's possible. Sometimes people are very attuned to when things are going badly, there has to be a reason for it. What is that reason? Maybe I'm doing something wrong. But somehow he must have found out. Yeah. One of the other stories, is, which hopefully we'll get to, it's very interesting how the ruler finds out. But somehow, doesn't tell us how, he finds out. And he's like, "Why did you do this to me? You should have told me." Okay, about people living longer and aging slower. You know, did people live longer? Our current consensus is no, they didn't really, but here it certainly indicates that it does, and it has the texture of this is a real life. So I guess they did. You remember back in chapter 6, God says, I think the text is a bit confusing about what this means, but my spirit will not contend with man forever. And so I'll limit his age to 120 or something like that. So you sort of see a progression of, you have these great ages, but then it starts to dial down so that their ages eventually in Scripture become like ours. But it doesn't really explain very much why is that? Is it because they lived much closer to the presence of God and the sort of the residue of the health of first human beings in the garden? Is that why? It doesn't really tell you. So, yeah.
Those like living 900 years, for example, will give you a lot of knowledge, or at least if you're defiled by sin through 900 years.
Yeah.
You're pretty messed up.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, if you're going down the wrong track, you can go down the wrong track quite a ways for 60 years, but if it's 900 years, at the end of that, you're really messed up, yeah, to use your words. Yeah, Stephen.
Maybe I just thought it's like when it talks about spirit contending. Like,
Yeah.
Like, because they didn't have the spirit with them, right? So
Mm-hmm.
if they lived that long, it would be like this fight, like, and there's kind of
Yeah.
tension.
Yeah, the tension between the spirit and whatever else. I think when in Genesis 6 where it talks about my spirit, it's much more the spirit of life, giving life to people and vitality, as opposed to the spirit in terms of the spirit living within us in terms of the presence of God, that kind of thing. I mean, obviously there's a connection, but they're thinking of it more like, God breathes life into things, gives them life, that the spirit is associated with that. Okay, so we're still in chapter 12, so let's keep going. Okay, now we have a switch. Hey, by the way, you know how you make the passage of time go when you're in a movie or something? You switch to a different scene, right? So instead of telling the same story but the same person, okay, they're 12 now, or they're, 2 years later, well, you can put that on the screen. 2 years later, or you can slap in a different scene, and then when you come back, you realize, a bunch of time has passed. You just automatically do that. So here you've got the first of what I would call the Lot cycle. So Abraham and Lot separate. Why? What's the deal? Because they don't like each other? Yeah, the herdsmen have quarrels. And why is it? Why are the herdsmen quarreling? The land is too narrow. Good. Okay, so their possessions are so great they couldn't stay together. That's weird, isn't it? Don't you think that when you get to be really successful, that everything's good, right? The blessing of God is on me. I have everything. What's the problem with that? Well, whenever you're successful, you encroach on someone else's space, don't you? Okay, so imagine that you've just gotten a promotion. Oh, here we go. We're going to go back here. Come on, stand up. Come out here. I just want to announce to you the new senior pastor of Catch the Fire. Hey! And now what's going to happen to her? Panic. Yeah, panic. Okay, she's going to panic. I've been vaulted way above what I can handle. What else will happen? She's going to steal. Steve will be put out. Ooh, what? Yeah, Steve will be put out. Why? Yeah, and where's he? He was the senior pastor. Now he's the sort of associate senior pastor. Yeah. 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 Whenever somebody has success, it's not just, it's not just like a free ride, like easy peasy. That's Latin, by the way. Easy peasy. Okay, so it's not easy peasy. I'm just spitting on you. Sorry about that. There's always conflict, isn't there? There's always a jostling and not a juxtaposition, but there's a jostling in there because everybody's got to shift. And what are people going to say about her? Well, she's a lot better looking than Steve Long. That's what some people would say. How did she get there? Because, I mean, does she have any training? I mean, where did she come from? She's not part of our family or denominational family. She wasn't born into this church. What else? Say that again. Will she? I don't think she's going to make that. Yeah, she's not good enough. She's not strong enough. No way. See, success, the blessing, if you want to call it the blessing of God, when you expand, you bump into people. And when they expand at the same time, oh darn, there's a lot of bumping goes along with that. So we always have this picture of when we're walking with God and everything's wonderful and God is blessing us, that it's just a smooth ride. But it's not. It's not usually a smooth ride. Something shifts. Where there was balance, there's now imbalance. There has to come to a new balance. Thanks. You can sit down. And I release you from the burden of being the Catch the Fire Toronto senior pastor. Chocolate, yeah, sure. If I had some. But that makes sense, doesn't it? And so here you have this, so Abraham, here's part of what's happening. He's being blessed, so wow, his stuff is increasing. Unfortunately, so is Lot's stuff. And now they're bumping into each other. And so there's a quarrel. Actually, the language is really interesting because in chapter 13, verse blah, 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 blah. Well, first of all, there's the whole issue of quarreling. And then verse 10, Lot looked up and saw the whole plain of the Jordan was well watered. Whoa, like the garden of God. Eden, right? And like the land of Egypt towards Zoar. This is before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. Hint, hint. There's going to be a problem. Another problem. Actually, sorry, there was something else earlier I wanted to say, but I can't find it now. But there's kind of a little bit of an echo, I would say, intentional echo of, hey, things didn't go so well in Eden, did they? They were kind of driven out of Eden, and in fact, in the next chapter, then there was quarreling between brothers. So there's a little hint like, oh, this is not going so well. And so there's this choice that Abraham has to make. What am I going to do here? Am I going to take what I want and just leave the left to Lot? It's interesting, his response, isn't it? What is his response? Does Abraham, as the senior person, does he choose the best part? He doesn't. It's fascinating, isn't it? Lot says, dude, you choose. I'm not sure what the Hebrew word for dude is, but it's probably like, you choose. That's a pretty big step, isn't it? Because essentially he's trusting God that God will make it work. Whatever's the best thing, make it work. And he's being gracious. In the world, that's not how that works. In the world, it is, if you've got seniority or power or whatever, then you take what you want, and the lesser beings, the plebs, they get what's left over. They get the crumbs from the table. So it's really an interesting move, and I believe it has to do with faith. That he's like, I'm going to let God be in the middle of this thing. And Lot chooses what looks to be the best part. I mean, look at that place. It's like Eden was. Come on. But of course, the narrator's telling us probably not a good choice because it's going to get destroyed. And the people are really wicked. And yeah. So already we kind of have a clue what's going to happen. But it's an interesting move. I don't know if the text is really saying this, but a lot of times in the scramble for things, we want to do what everybody else does, which is to grasp and to reach out and take and hold on to what we think is ours or should be ours or we have the chance of getting. I remember this time when I was in this church and I wasn't the senior associate pastor. I was the associate pastor, and the pastor who'd been there for a long time, he moved on, and so naturally I think what? Pick me, pick me, pick me, and they didn't pick me. They picked another guy who they didn't really know. And so they picked him, and that was a bit like, oh. And then he only lasted a year. And then it was like, okay, pick me, pick me, pick me, pick me. And so then I'm like, I spent like a couple weeks, there's going to be this big meeting. I spent all this time, getting everything to ready. I have this presentation. Here's why I should be the guy to take over, blah, 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 blah. And in the end, I come to the meeting, I sit down, and one guy stands up and says, I don't think that we should be hunting around for a different pastor. I think we've got the man right here, pointing at me. And another guy stands up and says the same thing. And they just all go around, and it's like, oh. I did all of this work and had all this angst. How am I going to present myself? Now, I wasn't wrestling against somebody else in this case. But in the end, it was just God. I'm like, oh man, why did I even worry about it? And a lot of times it's kind of what we do, isn't it? And in this case, I didn't really have to wrestle with anything because there was nobody else, but sometimes there's someone else, and we're so wanting to hold on to things that we reach out, we grasp, we try to gather things in, when in fact, maybe we should just trust God a little bit more and be at rest in it all. So, anybody want to say anything else about this beautiful chapter? Story of Abraham and Lot. No? Okay. What happens after that? Lot's down there, and say what? Someone kidnaps them. That's right. So there's a war. It's all city-states. So some kings from the north. Well, actually, Sodom and Gomorrah likely are in a covenant, in an agreement, where they pay protection money to some other guys. And so then they decide, no, we're not going to do that anymore. We're tough enough. We can take care of ourselves, and you guys take a hike. And the other kings are like, yeah, right. Yeah, we'll see. We're coming to punch you out. Vinny and Guido are going to come and, hey, take out your knees. And so they do. And they take out their knees, and they capture them. And they take all of this, I want to say booty, but that's not that great a word, is it? Booty. They take stuff, including people. Because you can, you can use them as servants, you can ransom them, you can do all sorts of stuff with people, including Lot. And Abraham hears about it, and what's his response? Who had this chapter? Somewhere back here, there was a chapter. You guys? You guys? Man, what's the response? He gathers his men, his army. And it's his trained men. There is a language like this. It's very normal kind of language. So he gathers his trained men, he goes off, and the result of the battle is, we win! But the longer part has to do when they come back, right? What happens on the return journey? They stop at Tim Hortons. Come forth with thine answers. Overflow from the mouth of thine mouths. Okay, he meets somebody. Who does he meet? Melchizedek. Okay, intentionally he meets Melchizedek, who's a king of Salem, which is probably Jerusalem. Not unusual for kings and priests to be the same person, at least in those days. You know, there wasn't a division between state and church. That was a joke. Some of you are smiling. So he meets Melchizedek. And in the exchange, is it just Abraham and Melchizedek? Oh yeah, here's a famous painting. I'm not sure who painted it, but somebody did. Somebody famous painted the famous painting. Say that again. The king of Sodom is there. You have the king of Sodom and the king of Salem. And what does the king of Sodom say to him? Yeah, give me the people back and you can have all the stuff. And Abraham's response, I mean, by the way, he's allowed to have all this stuff. And his response is, no way. I've made a promise. I'm not going to take anything from your hand. Now, why does he say that? He makes the promise in chapter 14. Blah, 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 blah. Yeah, that's right. Good. Verse 22. Abraham said to the king of Sodom, I've raised my hand to Yahweh, El Elyon, so the Lord, God Most High, creator of heaven and earth, echoing back to Genesis chapter 1, and have taken an oath that I will accept nothing belong to you, not even a thread or the thong of a sandal, and that's really ancient kind of language. So that you will never be able to say, I made Abraham rich. Yeah, you can always be richer. You know, if you own IBM, you can always be Bill Gates and have even more. So he's got a lot, he could have more. I will accept nothing but what my men have eaten and the share that belongs to the men who went with me. And he names several of them there. So there's a certain amount that, you know what? My men get some stuff, but I'm not taking anything. But instead, what he does is he receives bread and wine, which is probably a covenant kind of meal item from Melchizedek. So he recognizes that Melchizedek's, the God that he represents is the true God, the same God that he worships. So really a lot of the point has to do with who is our allegiance going to be to? See, he has the right to take everything. He rescued it. So he could actually take this. But there's something in this action of taking something which rightfully he could do, but it's associated with the wrong kind of thing, the wrong kind of person. And he doesn't want that tie, whatever that tie is, whatever that association is. Carter. That's a great question. Why does he not have a problem taking stuff from the king of Egypt? Probably because the story is already kind of hinting that there's something about Sodom and Gomorrah that is, it's not just sort of pagan, it's evil, it's despicable, it's disgusting, it's the antithesis of everything that God wants and God is. So it's not just that it's, it's a pagan, whatever. And of course you run into it, don't you? In a couple more chapters, you figure out what that is. So he doesn't want to have anything to do with that. So ultimately, we always come across these choices as to where our allegiance is going to be to. And sometimes we can say one thing, but on the other hand, we're sort of torn into two places because we sort of say one thing and half give ourselves one place, but give ourselves in another place as well. And the allegiance is basically a tearing issue. And for him, being faithful means well, as Carter's already kind of said, I can take stuff from somebody, but I can't go there. That is a step too far for me. It actually impinges upon my trust in God, my relationship with God. And that's what this is about. It's really not about the prefigurement of Jesus showing up. Just in case you wanted to know. It is about allegiance. Who am I going to give myself to? And the thing is, we say, I said yes to Jesus, right? Everybody remember saying yes to Jesus? Yes? Yeah. Yeah, good. So that's really good, actually. But the choices are, it's not always just a one-time choice, is it? So, there are points in your life that are even more, sometimes we make that choice unconsciously, but sometimes we run up against things that we have to actually make that choice again in a very full way. And for Abraham, this is one of those places. It's the same for us. Yeah. Questions? No, great. Okay, 16. Oh, sorry, 15. We're still in 15. Now we come to covenant. There's a couple of big things here. Let me just write this on the board that we keep cycling through. We cycle through covenant, issues having to do with covenant. We have issues having to do with the Lot cycle, which perhaps in this case has to do with allegiance. What is my allegiance? What's my choice here? And then you have the Hagar, Ishmael thing, which has to do with having a son and perhaps having to do it myself. I'm going to do it myself. And the consequences of that. And you kind of cycle through these things. Oh yeah, there's the sister-wife thing, isn't there? We keep doing that. So we're running through kind of the first several iterations of these things. So chapter 15, God comes back to him. And notice it's after he's made this choice. Okay, I'm not taking anything from you because I don't want to be associated with you at all. I've made a choice to go this way. And so, having made that choice, then the next thing you see is this covenant. A covenant sort of, in a sense, God is actually making the covenant here, although he's promised earlier. Okay, so in this, Abraham is having a bit of a whine, isn't he? In verse 2, and I don't mean wine from grapes. I meant like, a verbal pout. Verse 2, what's he say? O sovereign Lord, what can you give me since I remain childless, and the one who will inherit my estate is Eliezer of Damascus? You've given me no children, so a servant in my household will be my heir, which is kind of how that worked. So he's having a bit of a whinage here. And God's response is, he won't be. No, he's not going to be. I will give you a child. And then, and by the way, it's a son coming from your own body. You're not going to be adopting him somewhere. And then he says, come outside, see all the stars. That's how many your descendants are going to be. And Abraham, there's this famous line, Abraham believed the Lord, and the Lord credited it to him as righteousness, which shows up in the New Testament. So he doesn't really do anything. He just has a shift of heart, doesn't he? So this is sometimes what trust comes down to. And then God goes through this whole thing. But then he says, bring me a heifer, a goat, a ram, 3 years old, along with a dove and a pigeon. And basically, he performs a covenant ceremony. It's always called to cut a covenant because they cut the animals. And in this case, doesn't he put him into sleep? Sees a smoking fire pot. Not sure what that's about, passing through all of this. So there's basically a covenant that's made at this point. So there was no covenant before, just promises. But now God has sort of sealed the deal. You've made this, you've made a very conscious choice here. Let's ratify this. Or let's make it solid now. We're going to make a covenant between you and me. And then he talks about in verse 13, know for certain your descendants will be strangers in a country not their own. They'll be enslaved, mistreated 400 years. I'll punish the nation they serve as slaves. And who is that? Egypt, right? We're having a little look ahead at Egypt. But you'll come out with great possessions. And, of course, you're going to die. But anyway, you're going to die. So you're not going to see that, so don't worry about it. And I'll bring you back here. And then he says, for the sin of the Amorites has not yet reached its full measure. What's he talking about? What does that mean? Sin of the Amorites hasn't reached its full measure. Okay, not living properly. Who are the Amorites? Well, it's from the French, meaning amour, to love. And so it's the lovers have not reached the full measure. No. The Amorites, it's kind of a name that's covering all the people that are living in what will be the land of Canaan. So he's saying that they're sinning, but it's kind of like, see this bottle here? Well, they're sinning about right here. And they're going to keep on sinning, and I can't take you in the land yet because, well, it's not yet gotten to the top. Once it gets to the top, then, of course he doesn't say this here, but I will eject them from the land. I will barf them out. And you'll be able to go in and mop up the barf. No, I'll kick them out. Okay, so their sin has not reached the full measure. So, and actually, that's interesting, because God, in other words, God has all of this grace in here. I know God has a lot more than actually in here, but you understand what I'm saying. God has this, it's like there's a container, and God has a lot of grace, so as you're filling it up with bad stuff, you can reverse the trend. But if you just keep going and going and going, there comes a point at which, okay, that's it. I've just given and given. I can't let you go on anymore because you're not going to turn around. You're not going to change. So I'm going to have to do something. And so he's saying, yeah, you can't just go in and take these. I'm not just going to give you this land right now because these people are there. And I've given it to them, and you're going to have to wait. You're going to have to wait till they really merit not being there anymore. Then I'll give it to you. Okay, so he's kind of giving a view ahead. And then you have the smoking fire pot piece in verse 17. And when he makes the covenant. Any questions? There must be like 1,000 billion questions.
Well, if you use that analogy of like the grapes and stuff,
Yeah.
how does that change now that God doesn't run out of grace for us?
Okay, how does that change now that God doesn't run out of grace for us? In a way, it's the same. I think it's the same in the sense that, we can pursue sin, and God will try to hold us off. And eventually there's a moment where God says, okay, you're so pursuing this thing, despite everything I'm doing, it's not really helping you, so I'm going to actually let you get what you want. And then when you feel the consequences of that thing, then hopefully that will get you to turn around. There's a lot of stuff in the Old Testament about God just is so patient with us, and ultimately, then eventually, it's not good for us to just to be in the same place over and over again. If it's not helping us to just continue where we are, then God wants to change the environment, the situation, in order to help us. Because He's always about, He actually wants the best for us. You know the whole tough love thing? You heard that? Okay, that could be an approach right there. I'm not sure that that's always the first thing that you want to do, but God's ultimate aim is, I want you to turn away from your sin. And so, I'm going to give you the choice, obviously, but ultimately He'll probably do whatever it takes to try and rescue us, try and save our lives. So sometimes the grace of God is not always. What was it? Were you here on Sunday when Terry told the story of Harun? Okay, so Harun, as a magician, he was rescued into Christianity, but then people came and poisoned him about, hey, you used to be the great man, now you're just nothing, And so he kept falling back into this old lifestyle and even doing worse things. But then he would come back and he would cry out and he'd be, I'm so sorry, I'm just wrong, please help me, etc. And this went on, I think, for several years, this sort of cycle back and forth. And in fact, several times he was quite sick. He had tuberculosis, and God healed him. I think He healed him 2 or 3 times. And in the end, there came a moment where he came back again, and this is again over quite a while, and he said, again, repentant, I'm so sorry. And God said to Terry, don't heal him. And when he prayed for him, he just prayed a blessing, but didn't pray healing. Harun recognized that something had changed in this, and that change did something in his heart, where although he died, I guess not that long afterwards, but he, I believe, remained faithful to the Lord in that. So sometimes, God will do things or not do things because, man, it's not working any other way, and I have to do something to rescue you. So I think it's the same for us. God's grace can take some forms that we're not, you wouldn't necessarily think. Because you wouldn't think, well, not healing him is the best thing for him. But at that moment, it was the thing. Yeah. If all sin is the same to God, how could it be worse? Well, I don't know the answer to that question, really, but this is my thought. This is my opinion on it. Some sin, while all sin in essence affects other people besides yourself, some sin is quite minimal effect on other people, or slow acting, or whatever you want to say. And some sin it's immediate, has a huge impact, and is very detrimental to others. So, I think we all recognize that like if someone ripped in front of us and stole our parking spot, okay, because they were being very rude and obnoxious, even though we had our blinker on, it might upset us. And it obviously affects our emotional health for the day, or our emotional state for a moment. But it's a little different than if that same person came into our home and raped our daughter. So we recognize that there's different impacts that it has. And so probably, I would guess that God recognizes that as well. Some things are much more damaging and do more damage, at least in the short term, than other things. So he probably does make a differentiation. My opinion, not, again, I'm not the expert on this. What do I know about sin? You know. Okay, let's wrap it up, and we'll pick up again at another moment, okay? Break.